So, welcome. This is the Weaving Futures of Enoughness session. There's some of you that might have just come in, and I want to give a few minutes for us to kind of settle into the space. Oh, look, lovely faces. Thank you for joining. And we are going to be working with some experiments today, and some of those are going to require a cup or a glass or a bottle of water. So if you don't have one near you, I would invite you to go grab that now. And if you do have it already and you're all set up, I invite you to share in the chat in the meantime what has been drawing your curiosity today or this week. And you can come off mute and share into the space. You can put it into the chat.
I can go.
Yeah.
About the connections between, drawing up my curiosity today or this week. It has been for a couple of weeks now. But how many similarities are between the Inca culture with all the Mesoamerican cultures? So that hasn't been on my mind lately, that we have a lot of in common.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Sonia mentioned she's been curious about baby kangaroos today. Anybody else who wants to share? Traffic cones.
Oh, I get
These are, I feel like these could all be individual conversations that we could spend a whole hour on.
Oh, I was walking today and I saw ants going up through a tree, and then one of them was growing a leaf, and the other two went on that leaf. So I was wondering if that was coloration or free writing. Like,
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Also, I wonder how strong like one ant must be to be carrying two other ants equal its size.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I'm also seeing in this chat, curious about when all of our snow will melt. About bald eagles, watching Jakey and Shadow care for their babies in Big Bear. Curious about how dry needling can help with chronic endometriosis pain, polarization and selfishness, Afro-Asian food and historical reasons for that connection. Devanshu Vyas's learning journey on LinkedIn, seriously? The difference between urban and rural and remote views of equity. Wow, so many interesting ideas. Thank you for bringing that into the space. I wish we could dive into all of that today. Okay, so I hope that this was enough time for us to kind of warm up, and for anybody who needed to grab a cup of water. And I just want to say thank you for joining today. And I'm curious of all the ways that you could be spending the next 90 minutes of your life. What drew you to invest your time and energy into this workshop today? Arturo Escobar's new book on relationality. I haven't read that yet, but I would love to. Abril's already read it. Milagro said they're more than human designer, and that it's an interesting topic for women identified staff and imposter syndrome. Yeah. But everyone who is, it is rare to be able to gather with a group of women futurists. Enoughness as an elusive concept these days. Yeah, absolutely. There is incredibly much to do right now in the world. It's exceptionally hard to relax and stop. So much to do. When is enough? I definitely resonate with that. Yeah. The concept of enoughness has been a personal exploration of mine for several years now. And for a long time, I operated under the belief that success meant constant progress, always growing, optimizing, and pushing for more. If I wasn't working towards the next thing, I felt like I was falling behind. And I first noticed this while I was working on Wall Street. That was my first job out of college, where businesses were expected to grow quarter over quarter, year after year. And if a company missed their growth targets, it was treated as if there was something fundamentally wrong. There was something that they didn't understand about how business worked. And at the time, I thought maybe I just didn't fully understand how business worked. There was something like wrong with me. But over time, I began to question whether the issue wasn't with my understanding, but with the system itself. And then I started noticing how these same patterns of endless growth were showing up in my own life in the ways that I was showing up. That I was working towards the next achievement, saying yes to everything, setting unrealistic expectations for myself, and rarely, if ever, pausing to ask, is this enough? Or how much is enough? And it sounds like maybe some of you in this room have felt this too, whether it's in your work, in your personal goals, or just this everyday pressure that we feel to keep up. And I'm wondering, like, how do these patterns of never enough show up in your life? You can feel free to share in the chat as well, if you want to kind of share into the room as well. It's a quiet day.
I can speak. I 2 days ago I got the fellowship I've been dreaming about for 6 months. And the elation lasted for 10 minutes, and then I immediately felt dread
Mm,
because I knew I would, one, have to justify this choice of a fellowship of why it's the next big thing for me, and then what happens after is the immediate question.
mm. Just like immediately moving on to the next thing and the next thing.
Instantaneously. And it was subconscious.
Yeah. Yeah. I think over time, I realized that I didn't really like the way that I found myself leading myself, or the ripple effects that it was having on my community or the environment around me. And it led me to start questioning, like, what would it mean to move through the world differently, to shape my life and futures from a place of sufficiency rather than relentless striving? And could this be a starting point, not just for personal change, but for disrupting the cultural logics and the systemic structures that depend upon us remaining in a cycle of endless accumulation, extraction, and dissatisfaction? So that is probably going to be a lifelong inquiry. And I invite you all to join me if it interests you as well. So as I have been exploring this concept, I've kind of come across at least two distinct but interconnected dimensions of enoughness. One is that embodied enoughness. It's this intuitive, internal knowing of sufficiency, contentment, wholeness. This is the type of enoughness that's felt and subjective and can feel personal, right? And often it resists measurement and is not something that's easily quantified. And then there's the material enoughness. And that's a very practical assessment or calculation of sufficiency. How much do we materially need as individuals and as communities? How much is truly enough for me, for us? We're going to explore both of these aspects of enoughness today and the relationship between them, both the internal embodied sense of enoughness and the material calculation of what's enough. So I think it's really important to name here that when it comes to material enoughness, there are certain basic needs that must be met for survival, right? I suspect that most, if not all of us who are here today, are lucky to have these fundamental needs covered, whatever that necessary minimum is for each of us. And it varies for depending on where we are, the context that we're in. So that's the baseline assumption that we'll be working from today, that this inquiry into enoughness is possible, acknowledging that it's possible because our most immediate survival needs are met. And because we have this privilege, engaging with enoughness is not just possible, it's essential, right? We can and perhaps must ask ourselves, what is enough for us personally and collectively? So today is an experiment, or rather a series of experiments that I've designed, and I've designed the session as an invitation for us to explore enoughness together through embodied and imaginative exercises, reflection, and discussion. We're going to investigate this concept and uncover insights into how enoughness shapes our lives and choices. So let me take a look. I see some comments in the chat. The culture of more contributes to dysregulating our nervous systems, constantly in sympathetic fight, flight, freeze. Yeah, exactly. Taylor asks, is material enoughness still subjective? What do you all think? Let me stop sharing here. Anybody have some thoughts?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd love to answer that.
Absolutely.
It's Paula. Sorry, no video right now, but just audio. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Excellent. I think it depends on where in the world you are. Different people would consider enoughness on different scales, depending on what you perceive your needs are, given the expectations and perhaps the requirements of the society and the world that you live in. But I think that not enoughness can be objectively quantified, like not enough food, not enough water, in countries that don't have access to those. Each person perhaps can figure out what's enough for them based on their immediate or maybe perceived projected needs. Perhaps a country can figure out how much you need based on pressures from their citizens, based on sort of national cultures. But I think as a planetary set of societies, we need to figure out what's enough for, all of us on this planet to survive and to continue to survive in the short and the long haul. So not enoughness is definitely objective, but I think enoughness can be both objective and subjective.
Yeah, beautifully put, Paula. Thank you for sharing that. That it's easier to notice when we don't have the things that we absolutely need. And there's kind of a subjectiveness insofar as what is enough for me or what is my minimum is different from what is going to be the minimum for you. And in some senses, only you can figure that out, right? Or when it comes to kind of collective needs, only we can figure that out together. What is that amount? So we're going to move into our first experiment. And in this experiment, we are going to gently test and calibrate our internal sense of enoughness by experiencing how our body calculates and communicates the different states of not enough, just enough, and too much. I call this calibrating your inner Goldilocks. To do this, we're going to use this simple tool of the cup of water that you have with you, or a glass or a bottle, and notice how each of our bodies uniquely anticipates and signals these states. So this practice is intended to be playful, exploratory. There's no right or wrong experience or answer. It's a chance to notice and feel and discover how your unique body signals sufficiency to you. There's no slides right now. We are in the room together, chatting, experimenting. So there shouldn't be any slides. So I want to name that everything today is an invitation. If anything at any point doesn't feel right for you, or you don't feel like participating, it's your choice and it's completely okay. It's an invitation, but I trust that you will take care of yourself first. So I'm going to invite you to take your cup of water and set it down in front of you. And I want to give us a moment just to like land in our bodies. So you get comfortable in your seat. Maybe you want to move from like side to side, like leaning, maybe back and forward, and just finding that like balance point in your body. All right, where does your body naturally want to settle? And I invite you to take a few deep breaths, feeling your body, your belly expanding with every inhale and contracting with every exhale. Just take a few rounds of breaths at your own pace, allowing yourself to kind of settle into the space. And before making any movements to grab your cup, first, I invite you to tune into your body and inquire into how much water would feel like not enough. What is the size of sip that would be not enough for you right now? Take as long as it takes to kind of attune to that. And then when you have a sense of it in your body, then I invite you to pick up the cup and take the sip that is not enough. And then simply notice the experience. Notice it's settling into your body. How did it feel? What thoughts, feelings, sensations arose? If you want to jot down a couple of notes about the experience, you can. We'll also have a little bit of time at the end of all of this for journaling. And then next, I invite you to set your cup back down if you haven't for a moment to like reset. And then turn your attention back to the body. Take another few deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling. And now inquire into yourself, how much water would feel like too much? What is the size of sip that would be too much for you right now? When you feel a sense of what that is in your body, pick up your cup and take that sip that's too much. And then again, simply notice how that feels. I hope you didn't choke yourself. What are the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are coming up? And you can kind of like jot a couple of notes down, seeing how does that evolve in your body over a few moments. And then finally, we know what comes next. Take a moment to reset, putting your cup back down if you haven't already, and pausing to tune back into your body. And this time inquiring what would feel like enough, just enough water for you right now. What is the size of sip that would feel like just enough? take as much time as you need to attune to that. And then when you get a sense of it, you can pick up your cup and take that sip. That feels just enough. Notice that experience. Notice what arises. And I'll give you a few minutes now to kind of journal what you noticed. And I'll share a couple of prompts here in the chat to think about. What signals in your body told you what was enough or not enough? What sensations, feelings, and thoughts showed up? And even how did the shape of your body or your posture shift, if at all? I'm seeing some people journaling, so just like give me a little note whenever you're done. There's no rush. I'd love to hear when you're ready how that experience was for you. Like, what did you notice as you were moving from one to the other, from too little to too much to just enough? What were some of the signals that you became aware of in your experience?
Surprised by how I already knew what was not going to be enough and what was going to be too much. But I did it anyway. And knowing exactly how much was going to be enough. And I just felt like slower and relaxed and nurtured when it was just the right amount.
Thanks for sharing that, Inda. Did you notice that the anticipation of the amount was accurate to how you felt after the sip?
Yes, I felt a mini frustration in the beginning because I knew it wasn't going to be enough. And I did take a little sip and I'm like, I knew it. And it was the same with the too much.
Yeah.
I was very conscious of how thirsty I was and then how bloated I felt. But I was thinking about that water and thinking, what am I doing? And then once I grabbed my sip, I didn't need to think about the water. It was enough. And I moved on to my next thought process because my body automatically knew what was enough and I didn't have to worry about it. Maybe the having too much water will bloat my stomach. I felt this way before when you have to drink lots of water before a medical intervention, like to inflate your bladder, for example, and that's an uncomfortable feeling. And then when you don't have enough water because either you've run out of what's in your filter or you've run out of whatever your preferred drink is from your fridge, you have to think about what else you want to drink to like the thirst, or if you're out and you don't have your bottle of water with you. But then you're thinking about how water is affecting your body. Whereas when you just drink what you need, then you can move on to other things and not think about it. Not think about the body needs as front and center. So not enough and too much puts you firmly in the present. It makes you very aware of your present overabundance and insufficiency.
Thank you, Paula. Yeah, what I was hearing in that is also it's like when you're in some sense, if you're kind of don't have enough or it's too much, you're having to put more effort into thinking about it, right? So we sometimes think maybe if you go fast and you don't stop to calibrate, you can kind of be more efficient, but actually it sounds like you end up spending, in your experience, we're spending even more time thinking about it afterwards. So expending that extra energy as opposed to taking the time up front, going a little bit slower, calibrating, and then taking what felt enough. And I won't read all of the shares in the chat, but if anybody else wants to come off mute and share a little more about their experience, there's a little bit of time here as well.
I found that when I was paying attention to enough, I actually was very much present to myself. I wasn't actually thinking about how much to take. I was just drinking. So it was like the intention and the attention just made me just completely present to the water. And then I didn't notice if it was enough or not. It just was. I was kind of blown away. It was I was kind of, yes. So thank you.
Oh, interesting. So it sounds like there was some kind of like just like a natural alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I didn't know. I just knew it was going to be enough. And then I said, I know how much enough is. And I was kind of like, it wasn't an estimation. It was just a feeling. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I see some longer shares here as well. Ami, I'm wondering if you'd like to share.
Yeah, sure. So everyone's buying these water bottles, Owala bottles, and I bought one. I have it with me. And I didn't buy the hype. Like, it's like, how can design reinvent a water bottle? I don't think there can be that much innovation in a water bottle. But I've had it for a week and I've been drinking maybe 2 or 2.5 times as much water as I recently have. And it's just because I mean, I can get into the bottle later, but I've realized that my fatigue and my symptoms of like anemia that I thought I had or like malnutrition have significantly reduced. So this challenge is like at the perfect time for me to reflect on my water drinking because what I've understood is that how I care for myself, my estimation of what is enough is often very lacking, and being hydrated is a part of how I care for myself. And I'm often so involved in the present on what I'm doing, who's talking to me, what the world wants from me, that I'm not measuring what my body needs. And I need this external, overly designed tool to manage that. So when we were doing the enough, not enough, and then finally just what you need, I drank the most at the very end. I took some indulgent gulps because I was like, I've been really reflecting on how inadequate my mental estimations of what enough is in general with water. So very timely exercise. Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Ami. I'm so glad that this was so timely and helped you kind of recognize that times when we are not taking care of ourselves and things are feeling almost the ways that we relate with ourselves is from kind of scarcity or holding back in some sense, whether it's conscious or not. Soha, I see your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. So this month is Ramadan. And in Ramadan, for those who don't know, we fast from sunrise to sunset. And we're always asked this question, not even water. So no, not even water. It's a dry fast. And for those of you who fast, you might know, like, right before you start the fast, the things that you think a lot about is water, and you start drinking water that you don't need. and you know that you don't need, and you know that you feel bloated, but you still continue to drink water, like right until like the last moment. And then once you start the fast, the thoughts just go away. And this just reminded me of all that.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I used to fast when I was younger. My family, I grew up in a Muslim household, and I definitely remember the panic drinking, just the thought that I might not be able to access water for another however many hours, was very panic inducing. So now I will share that I have this like 1.5 liter bottle that I carry around, and maybe that's I didn't think about it until now, but maybe that's kind of a remnant of the childhood panic of I can't drink water for all day. Sabrina.
Hi. So what was interesting for me was I had actually just finished eating my last meal for today. And so I was full and what hadn't anticipated this exercise. So it was interesting how I'm not sure if like my perception was perhaps as accurate because I was already full. So even, I kind of had to compensate for the fact that, my belly was already full in terms of what was, not enough. It was hard to like, so I felt like what was not enough was more intellectual than it was my reality. And then I'll be honest, I opted not to do the part of the exercise that was too much because I'm already at capacity. And then when it was enough, then then I said, okay, well, how much water can I take in without it being too much, given that I'm already full? So what I take away from that is, is kind of the when you have already and you want more, it's like something that kind of is playing in my head, those concepts of, I guess I'm thinking even in terms of like, like I went to like our what's going on in society and that the with the capitalism and the haves and the have-nots and and all of that. And there's been like this discussion about those kinds of topics, but even in terms of getting back to like what I need as an individual, what people's individual needs are for their health and well-being, and how even that is under attack with no thought of just what people need to exist healthily and survive. So it is a very timely exercise. And I just thought that was an interesting twist on it, given that like I came into it already full.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There was so much in what you shared, because something that I heard in that was like feeling, even with this exercise, Sabrina, that you had to be in a certain place, that you in your fullness just after the meal, and what was enough, not enough, too much, that itself was like there was something maybe not okay with that. And what I wanted to share was that's completely okay, right? That's what is enough for you now, right now, in this moment. And that might change in an hour from now or an hour prior, when before you had your meal, what was enough was different than what is enough right now. Right. And there's not a right or a wrong. It's simply tracking, like moment to moment, what is shifting about what that calculation. It's not a one-time, calculation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was interesting that, you know, um, I just thought the exercise was interesting considering that I came into it already full.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you listened to your body and chose not to partake in the too much and all the things that, how that might have cascaded into just feeling uncomfortably full or, whatever it was, that you took care of yourself and still were able to partake in parts of the exercise. Anyone else who wanted to share before we move on? Okay, so I would like to give you a little, just to name that, please keep your cups of water nearby. We're going to make use of it again a little bit later. It's not the same exercise. You can drink from them, but if you can, like, try to leave a little bit in the cup just for the exercise later on. So for our second experiment, which I am calling the enoughness shift, we're getting curious about what shifts when we experience an embodied sense of enoughness. What possibilities does it open up? So I'd like to invite you to take a moment to reflect on a situation where you've been feeling like you don't have enough of something, whether it's time, money, rest, recognition, security, whatever else. Maybe it's this recurring thought, if I only had X, then I could Y. Or maybe it's a situation where you've been striving or trying to get something or feel like you keep coming up short. Whatever it is, choose something that resonates for you right now, and write a brief description of this situation. What is it? How does it feel? What thoughts come up when you think about it? And if there's like nothing that is currently coming up for you that you're experiencing, you are also welcome to reflect on maybe a past situation where you've felt that way or where that's come up. And I'll give you a couple of minutes here just to kind of journal and think about that. Okay. So I'm going to move us into a short visualization. If you're seated, I invite you to get comfortable in your seats. If where you're sitting has a back to it, maybe you want to lean back into it. Whatever position you're in, find a comfortable posture and maybe allow your eyes to close. And take a deep breath in for a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then exhale for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, inhaling for a count of 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhaling 2, 3, 4, 5. And continue breathing at this rhythm, or the rhythm that feels most comfortable for you. Just breathing in slowly, in and out, for a few rounds. And as you're doing that, gently bring your attention to the area around your heart. You can imagine your breath flowing in and out of this space like a slow and steady wave. There's no need to force anything, just noticing and settling into this rhythm. And I invite you to bring up a memory of a time when you felt completely whole, deeply content, entirely enough. A moment where nothing was missing and nothing needed to be different. If that's not something you've experienced, then I invite you to imagine what that would feel like. Maybe it's a time when you're immersed in something you love, you're surrounded by people who bring you joy or make you feel safe. Maybe it's when you're spending time with a cherished pet or pets. Maybe it's when there's a quiet, simple moment of peace, watching the sunrise, sitting in stillness. Or maybe it's just a time when you simply felt at ease in your own skin, connected to yourself or something greater. Let this memory come to life. What are you seeing, hearing, feeling? Noticing the sensations in your body. Allow yourself a few moments to fully settle into this state of enoughness. This moment where you are complete and whole, just as you are. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to prove. Nothing is missing. Simply being here is enough. Now gently bring to mind the situation that you journaled about a few moments ago. The one where you felt you didn't have enough of something, or where you felt you needed more of something. Without losing this embodied sense of enoughness, simply observe this situation from this new place. Imagine that you're holding both this deep sense of sufficiency and contentment and the situation you wrote about. What do you see from this standpoint that you couldn't see before? What are you noticing? Is there anything that shifts? When you're ready, take one more deep breath in and out, beginning to bring your awareness back to the space that you're in. Maybe wiggling your fingers and your toes if that feels good. And whenever you feel ready, opening your eyes and coming back into the room. And in just a moment, we're going to send you into breakout rooms of like 3 to 4 people. And I'd like for you to take the time to briefly share the original situation that you journaled about and how or if your perception of it shifted as you moved through the exercise. We'll have 8 minutes total, and then we'll come back together to kind of hear some of the insights or what came up. I think everyone's back in the room now. It sounds like, Ami, people want to hear what you had to say, if you don't mind. On the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very short thought. Inda was talking about what if we were to move through this world trusting ourselves more, and believing that we can. And then Sonia was like, well, if anyone but a white man had that belief, we would have a lot more power. And then I wanted to add that, well, my anxiety tells me that it's not realistic to trust, and I'm wondering where that comes from. So those were the final thoughts of that conversation before the breakout room kicked us out.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Carolina, you're sharing in the chat. I'm wondering if you'd want to come off mute and share a little bit more.
Hi. Yeah, it was just nice that all of us. So your practice just remind all of us some memories with nature. Like I mentioned the sea, and somebody mentioned hiking. So it's just a feeling of real calm and peace, and some real connection with nature. And it was nice because we just realized basically we sit in front of our computer our daily life, and yeah, it was a strange difference.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Carolina. Absolutely. Nature has such a grounding and regulating power. And yeah, when we're stuck in front of our computers in that like hamster wheel being busy, it's like you're not able to get out to the places that do help us recharge and reconnect with the sense of wholeness, right? And so it becomes this almost like a vicious cycle. Yeah. I'm curious what your experiences were about how you related to the situation you had journaled about, and what happened as you brought that into kind of an already embodied sense of enoughness.
The
I can
problem
share.
felt, oh, please go ahead. Okay, no, go for it.
Okay, I'll be quick. I shared that I just felt like a lot of dissonance between what I had journaled about, which was like the sense of enoughness in work, or maybe lack thereof, or needing or wanting more. And then when I was visualizing a time when I felt enoughness, it was like when I was just like out in nature, like after a hard day's work on the farm or on the ranch, and you have to pause because the sun is too hot. It was in the desert, and you can sit there and you can, enjoy a cup of iced tea under a shady tree and just like sit with the people that you just worked with all day and slow down and calm down. And those, like, I don't, like, I'm unfortunately, like, I'm not a farmer anymore. And so, like, those two realities just kind of, I don't know, I'm feeling a lot of dissonance in them. And like, is it even possible for them both to be true at the same time anymore? Or is that a past self, but not a future self? And yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a like what from the time when you were farming could be translated into supporting the kind of the ways that you're working right now and the things you're learning from that experience.
Yeah, I'll have to think about it. It's definitely been thought-provoking.
Ami, I think you wanted to share as well. I saw you just went off camera though, so I'm not sure if you're there.
I don't remember what I was going to say, but I think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So we have one more experiment before we start to wrap up today. And this one's going to be kind of a quick one. and it's called Expanding Enough. We're going to need the cups of water again. So I'm going to invite you to place that cup of water in front of you, and close your eyes for a moment. And again, check back in with your body to see, what would be an enough amount of water now in this moment. Don't take a sip yet, but just kind of like attune to what that is. And maybe it's different from what it was at the beginning of the session, but just attuning to what would feel like enough right now. And then imagine there is another person next to you who is very thirsty. They've just come in from a long, hot walk outside. Their throat is parched. And you only have this single cup of water to share between you. Can you check in with yourself and see what feels like enough water for you? Does the awareness of another person shift what feels like enough in your body for you in this moment? You can feel free to take that sip of water now. And I'm curious to hear what happened when that second person entered the picture. What shifted, if anything?
To me, it was this feeling that sharing is more important than having.
Mm. So even if the sort of sense of what you needed stayed the same, there was something else that kind of superseded it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was a bit weird because I could feel the other person being hot, like, and craving for water, but at the same time, like, for me, it was like, I also want water, but I have to share.
Interesting. So the
Yeah.
empathizing with the other
Yeah.
person and really feeling what they need as well. Yeah.
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 My brain immediately went 50-50. It has to be exactly 50-50. But before you said imagine the other person, I felt like there's not enough water for me in this cup. But then when you said there is another person, it's like, oh, half of this would be enough for me. But not less than half. Not 49%.
Yeah. But that's such a huge shift too. It's like immediately 50% now becomes enough in just a moment. Yeah. Nadia, I see you nodding along. You look like there's so much coming up. I'm curious to hear.
The same thing happened for me because I was like, oh, I'm incredibly thirsty. I'm eating dinner while I'm here. I'm like, I could really use some water. And then as soon as I imagined that, I was like, oh, I don't really need water right now. Like I can wait. I'm getting like liquid from the vegetable I just ate technically. So they can have the whole cup if they need it. And I immediately started like analyzing the situation in very discrete, like specific detail in it. I started like saying, what are other sources of water? And I was like, okay, I might be taking this too far, but I also start to see with that enough, like where does that enoughness come from as well? And like enough is something that is so context based for me as a person that it like really does shift when there's another person and when their needs are in there, like you have to dance with it. So yeah, I was definitely dancing with my water.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
I was in the breakout room with Nadia, so we had a really interesting conversation about context. For me, the notion of water was also dependent on who it was for. So if it was for my son who had come in from doing some work in the garden and he was really thirsty, I wouldn't mind just giving him the majority of the water and then knowing that I would be able to get water somewhere at some other time later. because I love my son. If it was a stranger while I was sitting at the bus stop and like looking like they've run out, I probably wouldn't give them the majority of the water. I would probably maybe, do what Inda suggested, give half, or, or just make sure that I wasn't, really flaked or thirsty myself, and then share what I have, the extra, as opposed to the um, the majority. You see, so there's a definite contextualization based on the person and that relative that affect with that person. How much affect do I have for that person? How much do they matter in my life? How much solidarity do I feel to them? How much empathy? Is my situation dire? Do I have any other needs where I have to say, well, maybe they can find their water somewhere else if I knew that I'm going to be dehydrated, so I'm going on a long hike. There's a lot that goes that really moves us in terms of contextual clues that determine our behavior in the moment. At least it does for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing so many different ways that we're making these sort of anticipatory calculations for ourselves. There's so many factors in each moment of what is the personal enoughness? How does that shift in relation to one person versus another versus maybe multiple others? And I'm also hearing that there is kind of like this shift when we start to consider who, even just starting to think about who else is impacted here, who's being impacted by the decisions that I'm making, by the things that I'm consuming, how much I'm choosing to consume, right? Because there are, whether it's someone next to us or someone in the next room or someone in the next building, how do we start to build the awareness of their existence and the impacts that the kind of resources that I might be using might be impacting theirs, and vice versa? So we have just a few more minutes here, and I wanted to, we're like done with the experiments. I just wanted to create a space for us to kind of like reflect. There was a number of different exercises and ways of thinking about enoughness, both for, our personal experience, the relational dynamics of it. And I want to invite you to kind of reflect on, like, what did you notice over the course of these experiences? What's landing for you most powerfully in this moment?
Mark left a comment in the chat, Mushfiqa.
How rich the topic is. Yeah. How enough is dynamic and relational. Yeah. Absolutely. So many different avenues and ways of exploring that concept. It's not a simple, like, how much is enough, but it feels like this kind of continual questioning to see how is it shifting and what is necessary, what's not necessary. I'm curious what would shift if enoughness was something that we practiced regularly. If it shaped the ways that we lived, worked, related, what might change?
Everything, I think. The way we move in the world.
Yeah.
More easy pace, I think.
Mm. Sonia mentioned one thing that I realized is that when I'm being by myself, being enough doesn't come into my mind. But when I'm with others, that's when I start to doubt. And Inda, how enoughness is related to fairness. What is enough and fair for me and others when it comes to resources that I also need? How do we want to relate to that? Yeah.
You know, there's this continuum that we're constantly navigating of abundance and scarcity that I think is, you know, we don't really think too much about in Western societies, where there is an abundance of many things. And yet there is also this pursuit of more in Western societies as opposed to sharing. And that sense of, well, how much do we really need? And how much can we afford to also offer others who don't have enough? And I think for me, this calibration exercise was a moment of like mindful introspection in terms of the things that someone in a Western society country lives and experiences is very different in terms of enoughness and scarcity or overabundance than someone in another part of the world that doesn't have that. When it comes to material, physical needs, as opposed to, say, other types of, what is often called first world problems. So, when it comes to health, I think it's something that people around the world can relate to. Having good health, having enough energy, is interrelated systemically with a lot of things like having enough water, having enough food, having fresh air and clean air and uncontaminated environments, and good relationships, because those also affect how we live in healthy and lesser stressed ways. So I think that there's a certain amount of stock picking that many of us who live in North American or Western societies really need to start taking in light of the problems that we have in the world, to learn this. And it's a learned thing. You need to learn self-awareness to then learn empathy with other people, and then learn solidarity and how to share. So that was my takeaway from this.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Paula. It also, it kind of reminds me of what Ami was sharing of, how am I taking care of or not taking care of myself? And am I able to identify how much I need? And then what's the relationship between that and being able to take care of others, and understanding that relationship as well. Yeah. I see our next host is joining now, Alice. So just before we close, what would you like to take away or maybe take forward from this?
I think to me is to check the context, to ask enoughness in relation to the context.
In
I think
futures and
you go.
in futures and innovation work, we often talk about better. So I wonder what the relationship is between wanting better and wanting enough.
Hmm.
Nadia, go ahead.
I loved that thought. For me, it's understanding that even when I'm alone and what I'm seeking for enoughness, always orienting myself in context to other people in the globe. Like any decision I make for my own enoughness is going to affect someone else's. It's not necessarily zero sum, but I have to keep that relationality in context whenever I like make a decision or pursue enoughness. So that's something I'm definitely gonna, me and my water bottle are gonna take with us.
Thank you so much for joining and for engaging. This was definitely very like engagement oriented session. So I am really grateful for you to kind of trust me to go on the journey and enter into these spaces to see what we find. Thank you.